What's going on, movie fans? My name is Michael Weer. I love talking about movies, and today we're going to continue on with our Saw franchise review series while we review the second movie in the Saw franchise. And if you're wondering, yes, that is a Saw 2 poster right back there. Every year for Halloween, I take all of the movie posters out of my movie theater room and replace them with horror movie posters that I absolutely love, and Saw 2 just happens to be one of those movies. So doing this review is fun for me on a couple of levels because this has been, up until this point, my favorite movie in the Saw franchise. I say up until this point because I'm actually doing reviews for them now. I'm looking for more things instead of just viewing these movies like I did in the past. So by the end of this series review, I may have a new favorite. But as it stands right now, Saw 2 is my absolute favorite because of how many things it does right, which we will get into in the review. But before getting into that review, if this is the first time you're finding my channel, I would invite you to subscribe to my channel. If you're here because you love Saw movies, well, I'll be reviewing every single one of them leading up to Saw X that comes out on September 29th of 2023. But if you just like movie reviews in general, I have a ton of movie reviews on my channel, or if you like Blu-ray talk, I have a huge Blu-ray collection back there and I update it all the time. So again, I invite you to subscribe to my channel to get all of my content. With that said, let's talk about Saw 2.
Oh, yes. There will be blood.
And so, guys, Saw 2 is directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, and that's a name that you will hear several times throughout this review series because he has directed 4 of the Saw sequels. And while the movie stars Tobin Bell as Jigsaw once again, it also most notably stars Donnie Wahlberg as Detective Eric Matthews. And there's 2 things you should know about Detective Eric Matthews before I get into the synopsis of this movie. The first one is that Eric Matthews is a detective that is willing to put people behind bars no matter what, even if he has to fake evidence. The other thing you should know about Eric Matthews is that he has a very bad relationship with his teenage son. But getting into the synopsis of this movie, you have Eric Matthews hot on the tail of the Jigsaw Killer. In fact, he has located where the Jigsaw Killer is, and instead of going at it alone like Danny Glover did the first time around, he brings an entire SWAT team with him. They break into the warehouse, go through some saw traps to get there, but they finally confront him and they say, "We got you."
Gotcha, bitch!
But they don't actually have him because he says, "Actually, while you may have me at gunpoint, you might want to take care of what's going on the other side of the room." And on the other side of the room are several monitors, and Eric Matthews and his team pull back these tarps and they notice that there are several people trapped in some sort of a jigsaw house trap that they can't get out of. And one of those people in that room is Eric Matthews' son. Now that's the best setup I can give you for this movie. You know that Eric Matthews doesn't have a great relationship with his son. However, it's still his son and he wants to get him back. And all he can do is sit there and watch these monitors and watch his son and all of these people go through all of these traps throughout this house. And I love that so much because in the first movie, you were there with everyone in their certain situations that were going on. In this movie, because the detectives and the SWAT teams are all just kind of helpless watching these monitors, you feel helpless as well watching these monitors. And every once in a while, it'll zoom into the monitor for the viewer and you'll be in the room with the people. And then you're like, oh shit, I'm back in it. I'm with these people. And I love how they did that because when they come out of those monitors and you're back with the Jigsaw Killer, you're back with Eric Matthews. Like, how do I help them? I can't help them. And you, the viewer, are just as trapped as the people in the house and the SWAT team watching it all go down. Now, if that sounds like a fun setup to a movie, I definitely recommend that you go check it out. I think right now, currently, at the beginning of September 2023, it's streaming on Peacock. But if you're watching this 5 years in the future, I have no idea where it's streaming. So with that said, though, let's get into my likes and my dislikes. The first like I have for this movie is going to be that the sequel does it right. When I think of a movie that has a sequel, I always think, okay, does the sequel to this movie elevate the storytelling? Does the sequel to this movie elevate what made the first movie special? And I think Saw 2 does that in every single way. I think the storytelling for this movie is the next level. I think the traps for this movie are the next level. I think the movie delivers what the Saw fans were expecting from Saw 1, but I also think that it brings you to the next level where you're like, man, this series is actually getting better. And as I said last time, the movies take a dip eventually, and that's going to happen anytime you have 9 movies in a franchise. But in this sequel, all of the right things are elevated for a sequel, and I appreciate that about the movie. I also really like the characters in this movie. Listen, I know in my last review I said Cary Elwes couldn't act in Saw. And he might have been able to act before that in other movies. I saw the comments, but here's the deal. In Saw, he couldn't act. I don't care what you say, it was bad acting. However, with all that out of the way, I will say that the characters in this movie are more convincing all the way around. I even like all of the characters that are stuck in the house. Even though some people have griped, I've seen online people upset with the fact that you don't really get invested in those characters because outside of Amanda, who is the girl from the first movie who was stuck in a trap, and the boy, you don't have backstory for any of the other characters. But that's not really the point, because the other characters are all connected by something that I don't want to spoil here, and that leads you to your main character of Eric Matthews. So I think that you don't need their backstories, but I think they do a good job with the characters in this movie, and I enjoyed everybody, pretty much everybody. I don't like the guy that got stuck in the fire trap. He always creeps me out, but maybe that's a good thing. And the final thing I really like about this movie is going to be the twist ending. They did it again. Like I said, the sequel brings everything to the next level in this movie. In the first movie, the twist ending, you had John Kramer getting up off the floor at the very end, revealing that he was the Jigsaw killer all along and in the room with both the doctor and Lee Winnell. In this movie, you not only get a twist ending, but you get multiple twists to that ending, which is, again, something the sequel was able to elevate. You had one twist at the very end of the first movie, and in this movie, you get 2 or even 3, depending on how you consider those twists. You get those twists in this movie. I really like that. Now, I'm going to go into the twists because they're very important to me, making my case for Saw 2 being a sequel that elevates everything. So if you haven't seen Saw 2, you may want to skip ahead a little bit. I'll put a spoiler tag up right now. So on the one hand, you have Eric Matthews that's told by Jigsaw earlier in the movie that if you sit and have a conversation with me until the time runs out, you will get your son in a safe place. And there's a gigantic safe directly next to the desk. And when the timer goes off, eventually the safe opens and Eric Matthews' son is in there with a little oxygen mask because he was in there the entire time, which leads to the even better twist to the movie, and that is that the monitors that everyone was watching are pre-recorded events. So everything happening on those monitors happened previously. But because Eric Matthews is a guy that cannot wait, he cannot just let things be. And that is sort of the test here for him, is just let things be and not tamper with stuff. But because he's got to tamper, he takes Jigsaw, says, take me to my son or I'm going to kill you. Jigsaw finally gives in, says, all right, I'll take you. He takes him to that abandoned sewer from the first movie where Eric Matthews gets trapped by the newest Jigsaw killer, Amanda. And that is the third twist, again, depending on how you look at twists. I like that she is there in that room waiting for him, knocks him out, and then chains him up in there and tells him, game over. And that's how the movie ends. And so it's done really well. It's almost like I said, it is the same sort of ending as the first movie, but they find a way to elevate that ending, and I really appreciate that. Now, when you get past those twist endings, there's one other thing I want to mention with the spoiler tag still up that I really liked about this movie. So Jigsaw has planned all of these traps to perfection, and he says throughout the movie and throughout the franchise that he's always doing this to test people. It's almost like he needs to do it. He doesn't get pleasure out of this. He doesn't kill people. He wants people to be the best version of themselves, and sometimes that means going through a lot of pain, just like he did once upon a time. However, in this movie, the very last shot of Jigsaw, when his entire plan has worked, Amanda announces herself to Eric Matthews as the newest Jigsaw killer. She says game over, slams the door on him. You see Jigsaw for just a couple of seconds as it zooms out. He's all bloodied and beaten inside of the van from Eric Matthews. He's sitting there and he gets a little smile on his face. And I love that because we're about to get into my dislikes where I actually talk about the Jigsaw killer as one of my dislikes, but I love that moment of him in this movie because you realize that outside of all the talk, outside of everything he says, he loves that he's able to punish people. He absolutely loves it. So even in his broken, defeated state where he cannot even go on as the Jigsaw killer anymore, he has a little bit of a smile on his face because he beat Eric Matthews. And I love that. I really do. All right, that's the end of my likes. I'll take the spoiler tag down now. Let's get into my dislikes. My first dislike for this movie is actually going to be a little too much of John Kramer. And what I mean by that is that I love Tobin Bell as the voice of Billy the Puppet on that recording. It's terrifying. I also really love how menacing he was in the first movie. When you find out that that cancer patient from earlier in the movie turns out to be the guy on the middle of the floor as he stands up and he's alive, you're terrified of him. You're like, what can't this guy do? He set all of these traps in motion. He's just great at what he does, and what he does is terrifying. And so all of that works for you. However, in this movie, you get so much of him in his broken, defeated, cancerous state that it almost takes the fear factor away from John Kramer or away from the Jigsaw Killer. You see more of John Kramer than you do the Jigsaw Killer in this movie, so that's a dislike for me. I prefer the Jigsaw from the first movie. Now, you could make the case that, well, the cancer has spread. He is getting worse. He's about to die. Okay, I understand all that, but again, just as a fear factor in general, when I watch that first movie, there's moments of it that are scary, and some of those moments come from Tobin Bell. Obviously, some of them come from some of his henchmen that are revealed throughout the series, but I loved that scene in the first movie with Lee Winnell taking pictures around his apartment, and you see that pig mask jump out. You don't really have anything like that in this movie, and I kind of put that towards the fact that they wanted John Kramer to seem like he was at the end of his rope, he was being broken, he was defenseless against Eric Matthews, even though he had this master plan. So while I praise them for the twist endings they had in this movie, I also give it a dislike for almost taking away the fear factor from the Jigsaw Killer. And that's really my only dislike for this movie. I've got one other issue with it, but they sort of clear that up in the next movie, and I know they do because I've seen these movies before. It's sort of with the Amanda character, something she says at the end of the movie, but I'll talk about that a little more in my next review because I think they clean that up and it actually end up being in my like category. However, for now, I will just say that I have a little bit of an issue with something they do with Amanda at the end of the movie. I don't want to get into that now because, again, I will talk about it more in my Saw 3 review in my likes because I like what they end up doing with that character. So yeah, stick around for that. When you see my Saw 3 review, you'll know what I'm talking about. Overall, I'll say that Saw 2 still stands the test of time. It's a movie that was made back in 2005, and I think they did a fantastic job with it. It's a movie that I want to watch again and again. Whenever I think about watching the Saw movies, I think about Saw 2. Now, I've seen all of the Saw movies so far. Several of them I've only seen one time, and a few of them I've only seen twice. But the movies I've gone back to the most are Saw and Saw 2. I'll hands down have gone back to Saw 2 more than anything else in this franchise, and that's just because I love that house aspect of this, that the house is the trap in this movie. Obviously, I definitely recommend this to all of you to check out if you haven't watched it, or if you're getting into the Halloween season and you want to watch a Saw movie, I recommend Saw 2 because I think it is done so damn well. With all that said, those are my thoughts, and that is my review for Saw 2. If you have seen this movie and you've got thoughts or comments, maybe you agree or disagree with me on some of my likes or dislikes, throw that in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think about Saw 2. And if you haven't seen Saw 2 and this review makes you want to check it out, let me know in the comment section because I would love to know that as well. And of course, if you like this movie, don't forget to hit the like button because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Alright guys, we made it to the end of the Saw 2 review, and just like the first time around, I'm going to now talk about my favorite Saw trap in this movie, and my favorite Saw trap in Saw 2 is going to be the revolver trap. Now, if you haven't seen the movie, I'll set it up for you. You have the people that wake up in the house and that are being watched on the monitors, and they're in a little room and the door is locked, and there's a key with a note that says, do not attempt to use this key on the door to this room. And so they grab the key and immediately go over and try to open it. When they turn the key, there's a revolver on the other side of the door that's pointed right at the keyhole. It goes off, shoots somebody in the eye. It's a great scene. What makes it my favorite trap in this movie isn't the trap itself. It's that it sets the tone for the rest of the traps in this house. While the people in this house are trying to get out and are seemingly offered ways to get out, I don't see any of the traps in this movie as viable ways to get out of the house. If you look, the revolver, there was no upside to that. There was no way to turn the key a different way, just like the other traps in this movie. When a guy goes in an oven at one point, when the girl tries to get the needle out of the glass box, I won't get into that because YouTube will censor me, but there's several traps throughout this movie that after watching it through, looking for a way out, I was like, there's no real way out of these traps. And that's kind of the point of this movie, is that they're just doing it to mess with Eric Matthews the whole time. and to get his son into that safe place that we talked about earlier in this review. So I think the revolver trap sets the tone for the rest of this movie, and when you look at it like that, it really works, and that's why it's my favorite trap in Saw 2. But guys, if you enjoyed this review and you want to check out more of the reviews on my channel, well, I've got all my 2023 reviews right there, and I'll put my Saw series right there, and in the future, I'm sure it'll be filled with even more Saw reviews. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.